Hello, are you there? Knock, knock, knock. Welcome to Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan. Yes, obviously, I'm Dr. Dina McMillan, and we're at episode 101. And this is an episode I really think you'll enjoy. It's a topic that touches on everyone's life because everyone has a relationship in some way, even if you're completely alone. If you work, you're dealing with other people's relationships. When you go into public, you're dealing with other people's relationships. And we're having a lot of trouble right now culturally, and people are even calling it a relationship recession. We're going to look at why, and of course, as always, what you can do about it. But I'm going to have some interactive exercises so you can actually sharpen your relationship skills. So, are you ready? Here we go. Remember, no more boring Tuesdays. If you're around on Tuesday, I chose this day especially because it was the day when most restaurants and fitness places and night spots have specials because too much of the week is ahead. So most people just stay home, hunker down, and watch TV. This is a much better option. You can actually learn things here you will not discover anywhere else. And not only are we live, so that you can sign in on whatever platform you're watching it live and ask questions and make comments in real time. If you're not able to watch the episode live, you can watch it on my X feed at Dr. Dina 1, Daily Cloud, Rumble, YouTube. They have every episode of this show, and we cover topics that will help you have the best relationships ever. And it's coming from an area of rare expertise, not just someone's opinion. Why do I say that? Because I'm a social psychologist. So that's what I study. Now, what is social psychology? Most people don't know. They think it's the same as clinical psychology, and it's not. What we do, we study how the brain works, and we look and examine how people learn, how they're influenced and persuaded, manipulated and coerced, indoctrinated and brainwashed. Yes, we look at some really dark and evil things. And at universities that study social psychology, believe me, they're doing a lot of experiments, bringing people in and seeing if they can change their beliefs and behaviors, especially if they can do it without alerting the person that it was an external force or a pre-planned experimental strategy that actually got them to change their mind, not just them saying, hey, I just decided to do things differently. So it can be very devious, which is why I want you to know how it works. Now, the good news is some of these strategies, some of these methods, you can actually turn on yourself to convince yourself to do something you know you're supposed to. They're also really useful in examining what's happening with the people around you. I want you to have a superpower no one else has. Yes, I'm biased. I want my audience to be more clever, more skilled than everyone else because you dared to have the courage to watch a show like this and participate in a show like this. Now, I want you also to be really clued in about what's going on in the wider world around us. So please get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. The material in this book was all over social media over the last few weeks as they've been talking about the impact of the COVID vaccine on women's fertility and on causing miscarriages. So if you've been on social media, you've seen it. Well, guess what? They talk about it in the Pfizer papers. Now, where did they get their information? From Pfizer. Pfizer went to court and attempted to hide the information in this in these studies, their own studies, they wanted to hide it for 75 years because they knew it would reflect badly on them. They weren't able to do it. And Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, and a whole crew of highly qualified, extremely bright people went in, dissected the information, and rewrote it so the average person could understand what it said. Now, when you get your copy, you're also supporting the work of Daily Clout, which works very hard to bring information that's often the powers that be attempt to keep hidden. They bring it to the public. But that work has to be supported. So please go to Amazon, get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. Now let's move on to what we're discussing today. And can I say, I was interested to see that a couple of the guys who are the most active on my show, they always sign in on the platforms that they use. So whatever platform you're watching it live, if you sign in, they will give you the option to actually make comments or ask questions during the show. And I'm more than happy to answer them. Now, these guys have, since the beginning of the show, always participated. And I had a detective game last week for my 100th episode, and they were very disappointed that they got quite a few of the answers wrong. That's not a problem for them. That means I need to fill in some of those blanks. And we're going to do that today. So we're going to be looking at the relationship recession and why so many people are just saying it's all too hard, I'm giving up. Hopefully that's not you or somebody you know, because we have some great answers here that will really help. You know, something I've been thinking about as we've been having these conversations is not just what's been happening in our institutions or in the economy, but what people actually do with that awareness. Because I hear from a lot of people who can see what's going on, who understand the risks, the instability, the loss of trust, and yet when it comes to their own savings, their retirement, they're still very much tied to those same systems. And it's interesting because it's usually not a lack of understanding, it's more a kind of hesitation, that space between knowing something and deciding to act on it. And I think that's something people sometimes look back on later with regret. So what I'm noticing more and more is that some people are starting to shift their thinking a bit away from just trying to predict everything and more toward asking very simply how exposed they really are. And for some, that leads them to explore ways of holding a portion of their savings outside of the traditional financial system, including in things like physical gold. Now, I've been speaking with Augusta Precious Metals about this, and what I appreciate is that they really approach it from an educational perspective. They take the time to walk people through how it works, what to consider, and whether it even makes sense for their situation without any pressure. If you want to look into it more carefully, just go to dailycloutgold.com or simply text CLOUT to 35052 and request Augusta's free information kit. It's just a way to understand your options more clearly so that if you do make a decision, it's coming from a place of clarity rather than hesitation. So this is another interactive episode. Frank has checked in, Frank Brescia in New York. Welcome back. He's one of my favorites and a very loyal audience member. We're going to make another interactive episode. Why? Now, if you've watched this show from the beginning like Frank has, you understand why do I put pictures on everything? Because there's something called the picture superiority effect or the visual superiority effect that makes it easier to remember information if you hear it or see it written and it's accompanied by a relevant graphic image. So when I talk about today making these facts sticky. And I have this guy with, I'm not sure, this looks like sticky date pudding, something that's very popular in Australia and that I miss. But we're trying to make these facts sticky. So by making them interactive and having you play along, I mean, no one's going to come into your house and see how you did. Please do yourself a favor though, sign in and tell me if you understood what I said, if you got the answer right or not, because that lets me know what I'm doing well and where I'm missing the mark a little bit and need to clarify. So we're going to have a relationship detective game inside the information today when we're talking about the relationship recession. So what does that mean? I mean, we're asking, are relationships getting worse, or are people starting to see more clearly? Give me your opinion. What do you think? And Nettie says she likes pictures to go along with the post. Well, thank you, but I have to admit, again, I'm a devious social psychologist. I don't just do it to make it visually interesting. I do it to help make the information next to it more memorable, because I want you to remember it when you need it. So what do you think? Do you think relationships are getting worse, or are people starting to see more clearly, or perhaps even both? Right now, statistics show people are dating less. They're struggling with fatigue about dating. They're frustrated with the dating life and the dating scene. They're complaining online ad nauseum about things like ghosting, superficiality, dishonesty, having to endlessly swipe, and the fact that that endless swiping means no one wants to try too hard because they just say to themselves, hey, I can just go on the app and find someone else. Bad behavior, and a sense that finding a good relationship has become significantly harder. Frank thinks it's people seeing more clearly. I agree in one way, but I also think in the old days, people would socialize with each other, and that's how most people found their spouse, through someone they know. People are doing less of that. And also, gosh, the endless studies they've done on what happens when people are offered endless choices. You would think that's good, right? Mm-mm. If you're offered endless choices and everybody has a new airbrushed picture, making themselves look better and better and better, what it does is it's like, you know what came to mind? Okay, I'm telling my age here. Does anybody remember Snackwells? Those cookies, the marshmallow chocolate cookies that came out during the huge phase when everybody was trying to go fat-free. And people noticed that if you ate the Snackwells, you ended up eating the whole box. First of all, there weren't many in the box. But also, because they didn't have any fat in them, they never quite satisfied what you ate the cookie for. And that's what happens with the endless swiping, with everybody telling everybody, oh, you can just, and thinking, oh, I can just get another person. I can even look at an app that tells me who's willing to date me that's in the area around me. What kind of thing is that? You are not, if you do that, you are not setting yourself up for a healthy relationship. Frank says he's been married 42 years. Dating would be a big problem for him. And I think dating is a big problem for a lot of people. I would also say over the last 15, 20 years, there's been a lot of cultural pressure and cultural persuasion that pits men and women against each other. So another problem you have is that unrealistic expectations, animosity, not having bad taste. You may know I've spoken about my book, Fascination with the Devil. The subtitle is Why Women Love Emotionally Dangerous Men. And A lot of it, I'm going to give you a hint because I love my audience. It's basically because cultural norms are encouraging that. So, with the book, with the programs, with my training that I am going to be putting out there to help single women be more appealing to the kind of men that are worth getting involved with, changing their taste, I will do the same for men if men show the interest. Women are usually a lot more enthusiastic about signing up for something like that. But believe me, as you know, I am not biased against men. I want men to be happy too. They're the other half of the equation. But we've been taught so many things, and so many bad things have been normalized. It's making it really hard for people to find and keep a healthy relationship. And I would also argue maybe we don't have an information shortage, we have an information surplus and a clarity deficit. Information everywhere. What do you do with it? We have more information available right now about relationships than any generation before. Everywhere you look, somebody is explaining relationships. Sometimes it's qualified people who've studied about this. Most of the time, it's not. And even the qualified people can sometimes miss things. I'm more than happy to admit if I miss things. So was my former guest, Dr. Carrie McAvoy, who mentioned my program on my Unmasking the Abuser and my anti-domestic violence program in her work, because even as trained as she was, when she met her former husband who was abusive, there were things she missed because she didn't find my work until afterwards. We have to keep looking. We have to share each other. We have to lift each other up. Those of us with credible information. I am absolutely determined to leave this planet a better place than I found it. And as you can tell, I've got my work set out for me. Uh, uh, Nettie said her spouse gave her a nickname. He called her a detective uh, because she was asking questions and noting patterns of behavior that were worrisome and seeing evidence. And he didn't like that. So he thought by giving her a little nickname and making fun of her, she'd stop looking. No, and hopefully not you either. And yes, there is information overload. We've talked a few episodes about everybody thinks now that they are a psychologist. I meet people all the time with Dunning-Kruger who think in my field, they think they know as much as I do based on what they've been told through mainstream media. No, I have to study hard. And believe me, I didn't stop studying when I got my doctorate. It is a consistent part of my life. Those of us committed to making the world a better place know we can never stop learning. And for me, that means never stop sharing valuable information that can make people's lives better. So everywhere I'm looking, tell me if you see this everywhere. Everywhere you look, everybody's talking about red flags and narcissism, attachment styles, love languages. Narcissism is everywhere. Gaslighting is probably number 2 to narcissism as far as prevalence goes. Trauma bonds. Everybody thinks that any guy they ever went out with, I don't know about you guys, but every woman I know, every guy I went out with, it was a trauma bond. No, not necessarily. Do you really understand what a trauma bond is? Boundaries. Now, it would be great if people started talking about healthy boundaries in a really useful way, but that's not what we're seeing. Toxic relationships. People think every relationship, and thank you, Frank, love bombing. Yes, everybody thinks every relationship is toxic. As you know, again, if you watch this show, even if I see toxic elements in a relationship, that does not mean you should dispose of the relationship. Sometimes those elements can be fixed. And I would rather, if the relationship is important, I would rather the people involved attempt to remedy the situation before they just toss it away. I think We have a world right now where everything's just too disposable. And it's not, that's another reason we have a relationship recession. More people than ever are confused when it comes to love. Because not having information is not the same thing as knowing what matters and knowing what to do about it. 25 years of training it's taken me. So we're going to explore the gap, and I'm going to ask you questions again. Uh, Frank wants to know what a trauma bond is. We've mentioned it before. A trauma bond is something that happens. It's a really strong, really resilient bond that forms inside an unhealthy relationship. And the way it forms, because our brain is not always our friend, is through intermittent reinforcement, through that intense hot, intense cold, intense hot, intense cold, really happy, really bad. That sort of thing forms a trauma bond. It is not a healthy thing, but a lot of people are working full time trying to figure out an easy, effective way to get rid of it because it is very resilient. So that's one of the reasons I always talk about prevention. When you start to see that pattern and it shows up early in the relationship, you need to know what this person is attempting to do to you. And at that point, when the relationship hasn't been formed yet, I'd say exit fast, don't look back. But we'll talk about that more. We're going to explore the gap in relationships. So I want everybody to really think about and play along. When we talk about these relationships, is this something you've noticed? Is this something you'd figure out? You know, when credible doctors start paying attention to repurposed medications, it's worth asking why. Dr. Harvey Risch, former professor of epidemiology at Yale and now serving on the president's cancer panel, is helping lead that conversation. A new groundbreaking observational study from the Wellness Company analyzed the off-label use of ivermectin and mebendazole in nearly 200 cancer patients being treated by licensed doctors across cancers like breast, prostate, lung, and colon. And the results are hard to ignore. After 6 months, 84% of patients experienced clinical benefit, including stable disease, tumor regression, or no evidence of disease. Dr. Risch, chief epidemiologist at the Wellness Company, called it an exciting signal, deserving serious scientific investigation and more accessible, lower cost cancer care options. That's why the Wellness Company makes it easy to access an ivermectin plus mebendazole formula using medications that are FDA approved for other indications and are being studied for additional use. It's doctor prescribed and USA compounded, designed to support patients exploring these emerging approaches under medical guidance. Ordering is simple and fully digital. Just fill out a quick intake form and a licensed doctor reviews it. Then your prescription ships directly to your door. Head to dailycloudhealth.com and use the code DailyCloud to save up to $60 off plus free shipping. Now, is everybody ready to play? Welcome to the Relationship Detective game. So, with this game today, your job is not to diagnose anyone. You're not supposed to come up with a label to put on them like narcissist or sociopath. Your job is much simpler. What did you notice? And I want to ask yourself, have you noticed this in real life with anybody that you interact with? And before we get there, though, I want to just mention something. If people want love, why aren't they dating? Here's something disturbing for all of you people who are not in your 20s, okay? A 2026 survey of young American adults found that only about 1 in 3 were actively dating at least once a month. Some of them are completely averse to dating. Do they understand what dating is? Dating is just spending time with someone to get to know them. It doesn't have to be a big splashy thing that you put on social media. It can just be having a coffee and talking to each other. But it doesn't mean young people don't want relationships. Large majorities of these young people also said they favored moving towards serious relationships and emotional connection. So what they're not looking for is they're not looking for casual relationships. They want something that really lasts. So it creates a paradox. People still want connection, but we are at a time when people are exceedingly lacking in confidence in how to get there. And I have to tell you, if you know someone that feels that way, if you feel that way, if you felt that way, I am just thrilled by the fact that I actually have information that can help you. And not only are we going to do this in shows, but with my new company, I'm going to offer opportunities for people to find ways to find love. Isn't that great? I want to be invited to lots of weddings. And here's the caveat: don't put me at the kids' table, okay? That's all I'm asking. Now, one statistic found only 37% of young people said they trusted their own judgment when choosing a dating partner. 37%. Yikes. Yikes. Well, I would argue that's probably not new. What used to happen before is that people would help each other. They would have family groups, friendship groups with similar values, and they would help each other see the missing part. They would match someone up with someone they've known for a really long time. They wouldn't just have to guess, or, if the person's awkward at the first date, they would, their old friends will say, oh gosh, he really likes you. That's why he was nervous. So you didn't have to rely on your own knowledge. And people are thinking, if they go online and hear all of these horror stories and have all this therapy speak, then that's going to make them more prepared for relationships. And it really doesn't. I'm going to actually be teaching you what you need to know, not all in one episode, okay? Let's be honest. I'm not going to do it all today. But everything that we learn and talk about is going to make it easier for you to find healthier relationships yourself. And guess what? Even if you're in a committed relationship that's happy, your relationship can always be improved. And also, you're being affected by the relationships of the other people around you. I'm working with someone young, and I see her relationship choices in the past are constantly, in fact, impacting her life. I thought about, here's something that I thought about that has nothing to do with the relationship detective game. This is personal, and I'm only telling you because I love my audience. Thinking about, of the people I've dated in my life, knowing what I know now, which ones would I go out with again? Ooh, the list is tiny, tiny. Frank asked about friends with benefits. Friends with benefits means tears on my couch. Rarely does that work out because we can't control the oxytocin that's released when we have a sexual relationship with someone. So oxytocin will sneak up on you and get you attached to somebody you don't even like that much. So friends with benefits, it rarely works out. One person usually gets more attached than the other. So I want you to all ask yourself, how good are you at determining who's good for us? If you are in a long-term relationship, a long-term marriage like Frank, how good are you at picking out what's good for the people around you? How often do you see serious flaws in the matchups that are around you, not just in your personal life, even work life, social group? How often do you spot things that could be a problem? How good are you? If waved a magic wand and every one of you all of a sudden had a dating agency and you were given 15 minutes to match people up, how good at it do you think you would be? That's what I want you to be, because you're going to be asked. Going to be around. It's going to be your life. It'll be your child's life. It'll be a friend's life. You need to know this information because, again, even if you are happily coupled up, everyone else isn't. And their personal life is going to impact you. And this is not just about 20-somethings. How many people do you know have essentially had the same relationship with a different person over and over and over again? Keeps choosing the same type, keeps choosing the same problems. And Frank says he's terrible at it. Well, you know what? Pay attention to what I'm saying, and you might get better at it. And you just never know when it's going to be useful. Okay, you guys ready? Woo-hoo. I really do need sparklers sometimes. Relationship detective case number 1. But they're wonderful most of the time. So what do you think about this one? They have a lot of good elements to this relationship. And remember, even though we're talking about romantic relationships, you're more than welcome to change this into a friendship if it's too difficult to think about romance, because the same dynamics and same rules apply as far as this goes. Lots of good elements to the relationship, things you want in a romantic partner, in a friend, whatever. But every few weeks, something bad happens caused by them, by their current choices, by past choices, constantly drama caused by them. And at first, they don't want to take responsibility for it. They blame your reaction. You're just too sensitive. You're always pointing the finger at me. It's not that bad. If you keep insisting, yes, it is this bad, because now you're a detective. You use evidence. You talk about patterns. You say, hey, it is that bad. And they apologize. And then they're nice again. You guys get past the anger at each other. Everything's hunky-dory and blissful and everything's nice. And then they do it again. The same type of behavior or something else, but it's also something really negative, something that really bothers you, more drama. As bad as or worse this next time as what they did before. Again, they apologize. What is your evidence here that you really should be paying attention to? The fact that they apologize? That's what most people would look at. They said they're sorry. They explained it away. This only happened because my ex was so difficult that sometimes I overreact, or I grew up with neglectful parents, so that's why I do this, or it wasn't my fault. Most people will focus on the apology, especially if the person can make themselves seem sincere. But now you're a relationship detective. You're focusing on the recurrence. That's the important information. You don't have to diagnose what kind of personality disorder or whatever that they have. That's not your job, and you're probably not qualified. But you've noticed a pattern. And patterns are crucial information. Patterns matter more than promises or apologies. Patterns matter. I want you to start remembering that. Frank says they're not sorry, chief excuse. They may be sorry at the time. But what you need to focus on is, if it's a recurring pattern in the relationship, every time it happens, there's going to be more damage done. There's going to be more trust lost. And it's creating a very unhealthy dynamic. And by the way, please stop trying to diagnose everybody. Unless you're a psychological professional, please don't. And you don't need to. Guess what? Here's the good news. You don't need to. I have heard so many people say, oh, this person's a sociopath. This person's a narcissist. It's like, oh, these people over here that vote this way are a cult. Really? And your qualifications to make this diagnosis comes from You saw it on social media. No, that's not enough. But again, you don't even have to worry about that. The detective asks what's happening and what's repeating. You're looking for a pattern. That's a much better starting point. And that is also what will give you the evidence to help you make a clear decision whether this relationship is worth fighting for or not. Because if they keep doing bad things and apologizing and it keeps happening again, the probability is high, especially after time 3, that the entire time you have the relationship, that pattern is going to recur. Is the relationship still worth it for you? You need to do some real thinking about that. And here are some things you can ask to see what I'm talking about as well, about a healthy or unhealthy dynamic. What happens if you disagree? In fact, when I train people in the first 30 days, how to spot an abusive dynamic in the first 30 days, one of the things I suggest people do is when the person suggests to do something small or large, you tell them no and watch their face. Because abusers detest the word no. They hate being in a situation where their targeted romantic partner has the agency, has the independence to deny them what they want. And they will often get really angry, or at the early stage when they're still trying to entice their target to get into a relationship, they just won't let it go. They'll just keep nagging, bugging, just until the point where someone will say, they're hoping will say, okay, already. If it's that important to you, I'll do it. Mm-mm. What happens if you disagree? What happens if you say no? Also, we're going to talk about this more a little bit later. Is it reciprocal? Is our relationship reciprocal, or is all the effort coming from one side? What happens if you're in a work team or a friendship group or a romance and somebody makes a mistake? How's it handled? These are observable questions. So what I'm asking you to do, instead of trying to read someone's mind, guess their intentions, or look everything up and claim that everybody is toxic, I want you to really start thinking, and knowing you can actually figure out what's going on and protect yourself based on just what you observe if you continue to pay attention. If you keep a journal, I don't know if you do, I keep a journal, even if I only jot down a few things every night. It's a really good way to clear your head, to see what was important. If something happens in the relationship and you start keeping a journal, you can just simply go back and count how many times you've had that pattern, that up and down pattern. How many times have they done something and then apologize and they're nice, and then back to the despair because they're doing something horrible. And keep in mind that is intermittent reinforcement. And if you continue to have a relationship with this person, depending how bad the bad thing is, you could develop a trauma bond with this person, and it will be really hard to get away. All right, let's do case number 2. The amazing friend. There's somebody you really value. And as those of you who know me and have watched the show for a while, this is a case close to my own heart because I've had a similar situation in my life. Whenever they're in a crisis, you answer, no questions, whatever it is, we're going to fix this. I'm there for you. Ride or die friend. One day you're struggling. They're too busy to help you. You're like, okay, well, I understand they say I'm going through a lot now. I can't really help you. But then they stay busy. They stay distant. They still expect you to figure it out for yourself. They're not there for you. When if the situation were reversed, you would have dropped everything to ride to their assistance. They say something like, oh, I love you. I've just got so much going on. Or you know what the kids are like. Or, my romantic partner, he's really demanding and he's going through a tough time and I need to be there for him. And these are legitimate. I'm not saying this person is a bad person, but what is your evidence telling you? Have you figured out what this evidence is telling you? What does the pattern show about reciprocity? And as I've mentioned, I've developed an entire show, and the first two tools from the McMillan method were developed and started based on this same situation being in my life. Because people underestimate the challenge of a non reciprocal relationship. It can be devastating. And over time, it lowers your confidence. It puts you in a terrible situation because it's not somebody throwing a plate or assaulting you or even yelling at you. Sometimes people underestimate how painful this can be. So look at the evidence and ask yourself, how reciprocal is my relationship? Uh, Frank says one busy, he can understand. More than one busy, goodbye. He realizes that the relationship is too tilted in one direction. Remember to note function. Remember, we're evidence-based now because we're going to detective style. We're not basing it on what someone says, how sincere they can pretend to be, or even if they are sincere, but we're looking at what do the facts say? What does the pattern indicate? And the pattern indicates that it is a non-reciprocal relationship. And that doesn't mean you have to end it. The whole circles of intimacy that I developed and I've done 2 shows on talks about I had a relationship where I had them in a close circle. They had me in an acquaintance circle. I didn't end the relationship. I just pushed them back so that they were no longer a priority in my life. So even though naturally, if they needed me to do something with me, they needed me to do something for them, if they wouldn't say yes to me, I started saying no to them. So no, if they tell me no, I tell them no. I started to think, would they do this for me? And if the answer was no, then I would say no, even if I was happy to do it, really, because it was too painful being used. And you can only be used with your permission. Please keep that in mind. And here's another question you need to ask yourself when you have these issues like non-reciprocal relationships. Does this relationship work? A relationship can contain love on both sides and still function poorly. A person can have good intentions and still repeatedly hurt you. If you are getting hurt repeatedly, if you see any negative pattern being repeated by someone else, there's some tough questions you have to start asking yourself. Now that you're a relationship detective, I want you to start thinking differently. And here's a little note. Why more advice available to everybody hasn't made most people wiser. We've never had this much relationship advice, and yet people aren't happier. Why? Because advice without a specific framework, without specific information about what to do with it, is just noise. It's just entertainment almost. It's just entertainment. It's, the people get the clicks and they get money from the clicks. And Frank Brescia wants to remind us the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Good intentions aren't enough. I want you to start being evidence-based. That's how you will have healthier relationships. And that also means when you are doing something for someone else, your intentions also, it goes the other way too. You have to start letting your actions speak for you, not just your words. And good judgment, whether it's in romance, friendship, family, work relationships, it requires knowing, what should I notice? So I need you to start paying more attention to actions and patterns of behavior. You have to learn, how much weight do I give it? That's where somebody like me can be helpful, because I can tell you after years of training whether something that happens is worth being a concern, serious concern, really big problem, oh my God, you need to run category. Okay? Is this an isolated incident or a pattern? Isolated incidents, we all have them. Life happens. When you start to see a pattern, you need to start noticing and paying attention. And what does it mean in this context? I want you to have clarity about what's going on in your relationships, in your life. Okay, case number 3. We all know these people. The relationship everyone envies. They're the couple everyone thinks is wonderful because they're always all over social media doing these wonderful things, going on these great vacations. They're always smoochy, smoochy, woochy, woochy, whenever you see them in public. They act like they're madly in love even though they've been together for years. I want you to start looking a little closer. I want you to pay better attention. And there was a show, and if any of you remember the name of the show, it was with Nicole Kidman, where she was Alexander Skarsgård, where they played a couple just like this, always all over each other, lovey, 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 dovey. But and they showed you her private life. But privately, one person carefully monitors what they say, avoid certain subjects, won't voice opinions that might cause trouble. So they're stifling themselves, they're censoring themselves. They gradually stop socializing on their own. I should tell you, there's a couple that I know, a very well-known couple. They have a nonprofit agency that works to help children. And I noticed years ago, I stopped even trying to do anything with her because she was never allowed to go anywhere by herself. I noticed that no matter what she was supposed to be doing, the husband always came. It was like he was stuck to her arm. And she is an abuse survivor. Now, you may not know this, but people who've been in abusive relationships are extremely at risk of getting involved in another abusive relationship, perhaps a slightly different type. I would be afraid to look more closely at their relationship when they're alone because I find it very worrisome that she's never allowed to do anything without him. So if you know somebody like this, with my daughter, one of the things that encouraged me about her, she recently got married. And one of the things that encouraged me about her husband is I still talk to her when she's going out to, a girlfriend's birthday, or they're having a girls' night, going to a girlfriend's birthday party or whatever. He's not going along. He still allows her or encourages her to be a separate individual, a separate person. He's not forcing her to be just his romantic partner, his wife. She still gets to be herself. And I find that very encouraging. Do you know anybody that once they got involved with somebody, you never saw them by themselves? They were joined at the hip. I even have that's even the name of a tactic that I have for my Unmasking the Abuser program, called it Joined at the Hip, where all of a sudden, they have an all-girls pink baby shower, and he's the only guy there because he won't let her go by herself. This kind of thing. And he tells her it's because we're so in love, we don't need anybody else. After this kind of, we have to do everything together, because it quickly turns into isolation. She can now no longer go. If he's not available to go, she's not allowed to go either. It's a really horrible thing because abuse thrives in isolation, but it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small adjustments. And if you're not a relationship detective who notices patterns, you could probably miss the signs. So think about all the people you know. Do you know anybody like this? Ask, has their world gradually gotten smaller in order to keep the relationship peaceful? Does she always, if you ask a question, do they glance at their partner before they give you the answer? Do they give you answers when the partner's there that are totally different from what they used to say? I need you to pay attention to this. Because if you're around somebody that's being coercively controlled, it can be very dangerous for them. And it could impact your life too. Sometimes important evidence in a relationship isn't what somebody does to you, it's what you gradually stop doing because of them. I see this, I would say, happen a lot too with men, where they will have hobbies and things that they enjoy, and they get involved with a woman who's quite controlling. And all of a sudden, she's speaking of their hobby with absolute contempt. She's giving them grief every time they want to go and do something, creating a mini emergency right when they're about to leave. I want you to look at this and don't just look at one sex as being the one that's causing all the problems. So Nettie says, the lady who wrote the book, The Sociopath Next Door, said there was one common denominator, the pity party. Yes, but that's another issue, because one of the things that I can briefly say today, because we're on a topic here and we can talk about that at another time. One of the things they caution you about is dealing with somebody who gives you the woe is me story, because it actually causes a chemical reaction when you hear somebody tell you a story about going through hardship, and it actually builds a bond with that person. And often manipulators, predators, users know that, which is why they tell you, because they're doing two things: trying to build a quick bond with you and also giving themselves a get out of jail free card, a built-in excuse for when they misbehave, so that you don't actually leave the relationship. Okay, so I want you got it now, right? Stop evaluating relationships one incident at a time. Every incident counts, but I want you to think back. Is there a pattern? Patterns change the meaning of individual events. Patterns can tell someone like me, who's been trained to see it, whether a relationship is going through a rough spot or whether it's actually toxic. If you're not qualified, don't try to do it yourself necessarily, unless the recurrence becomes more and more dangerous and you're actually afraid. Then I would say get out as soon as possible. And Nettie says the sociopath next door, she lives with some in her building. Start asking yourself what happens repeatedly, and then what is the cumulative effect on me? I want you to be selfish. Ask what the effect is on you, because especially, thank you, Nettie, because if you bring in the pity party, somebody during the relationship made you feel sorry for them, you may not even address what impact their behavior is having on you, and you really need to. You count. Okay, let's look at case number 4, and we're going to look at your work life. Ooh, you ready? Okay. You have an okay boss, but whenever something goes wrong, blame moves downward, and you may be the person who gets targeted, or maybe they have a scapegoat where they always blame one person. Whenever something goes well, they always take full credit. So what I want you to do, if you are in that situation, if you're talking about, is this a healthy workplace or not, don't diagnose the boss, diagnose the system. What behavior at this workplace gets rewarded? What gets punished? What have employees learned to do to remain safe? And if you see enormous suppression, repression, self-censorship in a workplace, polish up your resume and start looking, because and especially we spend so much time working. If you're in an unhealthy workplace, it can devastate your life. And don't kid yourself. It's going to affect your personal life, and that's inevitable. All of this is why relationship clarity matters at work and as well as at home. You really have to be clear on what's going on around me. What actions am I doing? How am I interacting with this person? What's happening with them towards me? Isn't that amazing that it's such a simple step and nobody was doing it? But you can't really fix a relationship if you don't know where you are right now. And knowing isn't enough. There's often a chasm between knowing something and doing something about it. And that's why when I developed my company, because I've been at this for 25 years, I had a definite, still do have a company in Australia. But when I came back to the States at the end of last year, at the end of 2025, I decided I was going to expand. I was going to take more of the knowledge I had to help people, especially here in America, have better relationships. So I also knew, even if you know you should do something, it's often really hard to motivate yourself. It's hard to know what's the first step that you should take. It's hard to get the guidance and support you need to keep going when it gets tough. I offer all of that within my company because my company says, see, understand, and then address. So all three steps, I'm going to help you see clearly, understand better, and then address the problem. And I'm going to guide you and support you. So I just wanted you to know that because I know this information we're talking about, it gets potentially confronting. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you without somewhere to go if you are in a situation and you don't know what to do about it. And in fact, we had somebody last week that said, oh, I'm in a terrible situation. I asked him to contact me and he hasn't. I hope he's watching. Please contact me. We can get you help. So it is important to see the details and the dynamics. Now remember, dynamics are two sides. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not going to just sit there and ask what is the impact of their behavior on you. I'm going to also look, what are you doing towards them? Both sides are critical to developing a plan to improve something. Then you have to understand it. You have to see what this information means, including, should I say, is this relationship worth saving? What do we need to do? And I say we because you can't fix a relationship on one side unless the bulk of the problem is coming from you. Then you can change your behavior and that can actually improve things dramatically. But most of the time, there are issues on both sides, or the primary issues are coming from the other person, people who come to see me. And I want you to understand why this happens, what is happening, validate how you feel, know what's crucial information and what isn't. And then what do I do with what I know? Guidance and support to get you to the other side. It's why healthy relationship education matters. And with all of my work internationally on and having developed the first domestic violence prevention program, I get a lot of people thinking that all I know is how to stay away from bad relationships. That's not true. I know just as much about building and maintaining healthy ones. And I want everybody in a healthy relationship. So here's the last case. Relationship detective case number 5. Someone you love has a behavior that repeatedly causes problems. You've explained your views. They say they understand. They seem to understand. They apologize. They genuinely seem sorry. But nothing changes. This isn't like the first case where they stopped, it was a disagreement or a bad act. This is something where the person is doing something and they don't even try to change. In the first case, they would actually change the behavior, at least for a little while. With this case, nothing changes. What does that mean to you? At what point does repeated failure to change become part of the evidence? Don't simply discard the behavioral evidence because the answer is something you don't want to see. In order to be a relationship detective, you not only have to be willing to see things clearly and face some uncomfortable truths. You cannot dismiss something just because it's uncomfortable to acknowledge it. Frank says it's time to end that relationship. I think so too. But I don't think giving up on love is the answer for any of what we've talked about today. I think we need something more fundamental, better discernment. We have to be more discerning, more aware, more knowledgeable. What counts, what doesn't? What am I seeing a pattern of? Learn to see it. Allow yourself to see it. Give yourself permission to see it, and then make it count. And I wanted to show you something else too.
For 100 episodes of Heart and Mind, we've explored how people think, how we're influenced, how manipulation works, how we miss things, and how understanding human behavior can help us navigate life more effectively. But for a long time, I've been building something beyond the show, the McMillan Method. It's where I turn cognitive and behavioral science into practical tools you can actually use to understand your relationships, recognize manipulation, identify hidden patterns, evaluate risk, navigate workplace behaviors, build and maintain healthy relationships, and make better informed decisions. We're doing it through clarity tools, books, classes, professional training, healthy relationship education, protective programs, and more. Take a look at the clarity tools. The Unmasking the Abuser program. Healing the Rift anti-bias training. Books, printed, audio version, and ebooks. The Unmasking the Abuser podcast series. And the list of products and services is growing quickly. Different resources, one purpose, helping you see what you couldn't see before. Now you can see what others miss. The McMillan Method. See clearly, choose wisely, live better.
And I wanted you to know that insight changes everything. So all the clarity tools that I'm talking about, they're an important first step, and they're so easy. Most people can use one of the clarity tools in 10 minutes. So it's an HTML format, as I mentioned. You go online, it asks you some questions, you quickly answer. Don't think about it too much. We want real answers. You push a button, and it gives you a score, tells you what the score means, a basic understanding. There's also a score guide available for only a small additional cost that goes into more detail about what your score means. Plus, it gives you some insights into what you can do about it. Remember, I told you, I don't want to just leave you hanging saying, okay, I've identified a problem. What happens now? The score guide can help you start understanding what to do next. So please think about contacting me either on X at @DrDina1 or coming to the McMillan Method, which is www.themcmillanmethod.com. So thank you, everybody. Let me know what you think about the questions. Let me know if by looking at patterns in all the relationships around you, and it could be just people you socialize with or friendship groups you see, what does it change about how you think about things? I want to make this work. I want all of the information. This is not entertainment. This is about making your life better. And one of the things you can contact me about, if there's a topic you want me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. And I will see you again next Tuesday. Thank you for joining me on Heart and Mind. I'm Dr. Dina McMillan, and I will see you next week because I promise you no more boring Tuesdays. See you then.